there, I'm Jennifer Valor, your host of the Child Free Biz Cafe and Productivity Coach, the podcast where child free entrepreneurs redefine success on their terms. In each episode, I sit down with inspiring business owners and creators, exploring their unique journeys, challenges, triumphs, and lessons learned. Passionate about the incredible fulfillment of the child free lifestyle, we'll chat over your favorite coffee or tea in our virtual cafe. From entrepreneurs to artists, we uncover secrets to success, share practical tips, and celebrate diverse paths in the child free life. Get ready for insightful conversations, empowering stories, and a community that embraces their child free life. This is the Child Free Biz Cafe, where fulfillment and happiness meets entrepreneurship. Today, I'm excited to be talking to Dawn Pick Benson, writer and travel coach, helping women in midlife pivot points like divorce, becoming an empty nester, during loss and retirement, create a solo travel experience that brings healing and clarity to who they are and who they want in this next phase of their life. Hi, Dawn. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to chat about this.
Yeah. So tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm a writer and a transformational travel coach. Like you said, I work with women who are kind of in the middle of big life change and think that travel might be a key to helping them to kind of rediscover themselves, find clarity in the midst of that pivot point. So I also obviously love to travel, spend maybe 3 to 6 months a year overseas. And right now I'm in Michigan in my home. So back in the US for a while. Yeah, I think that covers it.
All right. Yeah, we'll get into more of everything else in a little bit.
Yeah.
First, share about your child free journey.
Yes. I'm one of those people who, I was thinking about this earlier today. I'm one of those people who, being little, I was never someone who really wanted to have kids and wanted to have a big family or anything like that. And I always knew that about myself. And it became interesting because I grew up in a small town and in a conservative culture and in a church. And so I was a little bit pushing against the grain of what was expected of a woman who you're generally supposed to grow up and end up having a family. And I always knew that that wasn't something that I really desired. But I also, it's interesting, I was thinking about it. I left a lot of room for the fact that maybe I always thought, well, maybe I'll change. Or people said that to me too. They would say, oh, don't worry, when you get older or once you get married, you'll just want to have kids. And I heard that. And also part of me was like, I don't know about that, but that's my decision, not yours. And people always have opinions, interestingly,
Yeah.
about whether or not you have kids, which is none of their business, but I got a lot of those opinions. And so I heard that enough that I actually probably thought maybe it would happen. But I did, eventually started dating someone seriously in my 20s who I ended up marrying and had that conversation of, hey, I don't think that I want to have children. I don't know if that's going to change. Maybe it will, but I don't think so. And so we were always really open about that. And he was okay with that. I'm divorced now, but we were married almost 20 years. And even during that time, every so often we'd check in with, did you, how are you feeling about this? Because I always did kind of leave room for maybe I might change my mind. And if I did, or if one of us changed our mind, then that would be a whole different conversation. But it was interesting. And as I became late 20s, mid 30s, etc., people started asking me more and more questions about, are you going to have kids or not? And you get those opinions of, remember one person who I think was very well meaning, but said, what are you going to do when you get old though? Who's going to take care of you? And honestly, I would say for me, that has always been the scariest piece is if I choose this, am I going to end up being like completely alone and no one to take care of me? Which is, as I thought about it, though, that's a really self-serving reason to have children. This is what I told that person. That's nice, but if I know, I had to check in with myself and be like, if I know that I really am not imagining having this family, then me deciding based on everyone telling me I'm going to be alone when I'm old is really not a good reason to bring a child into the world. Okay, I brought you in so that you can take care of me when I'm old. That's interesting what people think. I also had people tell me, you just really don't know love until you have a child, and I'd hate for you to miss out on that. So that part of my journey was me, and maybe that's what I want to say is my journey was a lot of me checking in with myself of what do I want, not versus what is the culture telling me or what are people around me saying that you need to do this or you're not going to feel fully loved, which I think is a terrible thing to say to someone because you, first of all, don't always know why someone doesn't have children. So or you're saying, people who maybe can't have kids or choose not to, or relegated to not have love our entire existence on the earth. It's ridiculous
Right.
to think about that. My journey was never a choice in terms of like, I want to have a specific kind of life or a specific career, and it might be easier for me if I don't have kids. It really was never based on any of that. Because in fact, there were a lot of times where I thought, I just wish I wanted to have children. I'd fit in better if I did all these things, but it was never something that I wanted. And it's always interesting what people fill in the blanks with, assuming that you don't like kids. Or me, I've always worked. And so people sometimes I can tell they think I chose my career. That's why I didn't have kids. And that's really not for me, the story. I just think people make a lot of assumptions. My journey has been noticing those assumptions,
Hmm.
but also trying not to let them take me off course and feel like a jerk or like a bad person or selfish because of how I feel. Like I understand everything. I don't understand really why. I never desired that because I do like kids. I have lots of nieces and nephews and love them dearly.
Well, that and after working in home health care briefly, like it's not guaranteed the kids are going to be there at the end
This
at
is,
all,
yeah, this
among
is
other
true.
things.
Yeah, because I've had lots of people mention that. Now that my friends, I'm in my 50s now, so people are my friends that are older now mention that as well. They're like, yeah, this that doesn't necessarily mean that they're taking care of you or that that's kind of a misnomer.
Hmm.
It might be the case, but when I ended up getting divorced, it was also a huge thing that I had to process as well of just because when you're if you're married and don't have kids, that spouse is your family basically. And
Yeah.
so then I had to wrestle with it all over again after that of, well, now that one person that was my family is not there either that you were assuming you're going to grow old with, and now it's like, oh, now I'm now looking at it differently as well, and there's a lot of fear involved in that, but you also step through it and you've learned to find really good friends and community otherwise and
Yeah, I was
stepping
gonna say it's like what we're not capable of making friends throughout our lives or something. Like it's more of a chosen family these days too. That
Mhm.
makes it feel like easier having the chosen family and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
different family dynamics. Like what the traditional family is very different now. And family is still yourself with or without a pet or just any sort of dynamic. That's
yeah.
okay too.
And I do think I don't know if we forget that or it's just, it is changing, right? And I learned, and maybe I didn't really learn it till my 40s. I think in my 20s and 30s, I had friends, but they were, maybe I wasn't as, didn't go as deep with them. And as I got a little bit older and also just realizing how important those chosen friends are. I call them my yard. Other way would be my people or whatever, but I call them my yard and they know I call them that. They're the people that I trust to be in my space and not cause havoc in my yard, right? They're the
Hmm.
people who you want to come around and hang out with and enjoy life together. And that is really beautiful and powerful when you find those people. It's not easy sometimes, but I think I came to a point where I became more intentional about it, where I just started choosing people. That's why I call them my yard, because I started to be able to envision. I had a friend challenge me about it and give me this visual of envisioning it as the people you would want and trust in your space that are going to bring life to it and enjoyment and not like digging up your daffodils or making it throwing beer cans in your yard. They're the people you would trust. And so that's where the yard comes from, is those people just being intentional and noticing the friendships that give me life versus the one that suck the life out
Right.
of me, and choosing to spend more time with them and developing that. And I think that's also something, a perk of being child free, is we have a little more time to spend with our friends and to be intentional in those ways.
Oh, absolutely. How has being child free improved your freedom, resources, and business?
I've never thought about it necessarily in terms of improving my life. It was something I always knew that wasn't for me. I don't think I ever think about it in terms of how it improves my life because it's just been part of my life. Like this is how I am, this is what my desire is. I'm sure as a travel coach, outside people would say, yeah, for sure, that make your life easier. I'm in the middle of the day in my home. It's quiet. I don't have to worry about anyone interrupting my work. And I travel as a travel coach. I travel a lot. I spend several months out of the year overseas. That would be much more difficult if I had kids. Maybe if they were adults by now, it'd be a little easier. But it allows me a freedom of movement in the world that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. And I say definitely for sure that has allowed me to live my life a little bit differently and have more freedom in that way.
Okay. So, what's the difference between a travel agent and a travel coach?
Okay, I get asked this a lot because people are really familiar with travel agents and travel coaches are kind of a newer thing. So, if you're familiar with a travel agent, a lot of people go, let's say, I know I want to go on a trip. I contact a travel agent, and that travel agent is often just going to listen to, they listen to where you might want to go, or they'll suggest something. They'll be like, okay, you want to go to Paris? All right, let me figure out an itinerary for you. Or where do you want to go? Okay, well, I got some sales here. Let's go. Let's choose that. So I'm generalizing a bit. Every travel agent does things differently. But in general, you go to them and you ask them to plan your trip for you. And they go away and they ask you a few questions and then they will plan your trip to Paris, set out your itinerary for you, try to tailor it a little bit to what you said, but they're also choosing hotels based on what they have, partnerships with often, things like that. If you were to work with a travel coach, I look at it as I am here to empower you to make those decisions and to create that trip. First of all, I know that there's a lot of research out there that shows that when people plan their own trip, put some skin in the game and actually deal with some of those details, that they actually get more enjoyment out of the trip and it's more transformational to them. It's actually more empowering to them to do that work and not outsource it to someone else. So when I work with, and maybe I'll just kind of paint a picture of what it's like to work with me as a travel coach, that'll probably give a good context. The difference would be when you work with a travel coach. When I work with clients, I use what I call the BRAVE process. My program is called Brave Journey, so it works out well. It's an acronym. And I take the people I work with through a process because I'm very much about creating a transformational experience for someone, especially when we're in the middle of those pivot points, that big life change. That's what we're looking for. We don't necessarily need some, because sometimes if you choose a travel agent, you end up with a trip that has an itinerary that has like 8 days. I'm going to a different city every day or every other day. And that may or may not be what you need. So when I go through the BRAVE process, the B stands for befriend yourself. So that's where we start. Is I believe that anyone who's interested in traveling or going on a trip, you likely have a desire inside of you. Like there's something you're looking for. There's a reason you want to travel. There's a reason you want to go overseas or you want to go to California or wherever it is. There's something that you're not feeling that you want to feel. And we go through this process in and befriending yourself is like learning about yourself, imagining the most amazing trip possible for yourself. What does that look like? We also look at old and new stories that we tell ourselves because there's a lot packed into deciding to travel and whether or not we want to go somewhere. So I take a lot of time helping them really suss out what are those feelings, those things that you want to feel on your trips. For example, you might feel like I want a trip where I feel brave and adventurous and alive. Well, that trip might take you somewhere. Let's say you end up in the going to South America and you want to go zip lining because you think about those feelings. It's going to be, brave, adventurous. You're going to go something maybe off the beaten path, do some things that make you feel alive, potentially a little scary. That's a very different trip than I have a client named Robin who after 40 plus years being married, ended up getting divorced and came to me saying, I really want to go on a solo trip, but I'm kind of nervous. I'm not sure how to plan that. Where do I start? And had her do this exercise of envisioning the trip, which kind of helps us suss out and get to know ourselves and what we're looking for. And what she imagined was being in the south of France at a cafe alone for the first time in forever with no one needing anything. She has children and just wanted to be somewhere where no one needed anything and I could just read she's like, I just want to read a book and drink some coffee and then we'll meander down the street. And so when she painted that picture, then we look at that and go, what feelings are you looking for in that trip? And for her, she was looking to be for peaceful, inspiration, and then also a little bit of courage. So, because this is the first time she went alone. So that helped us map out her trip, which would look very different than the one I mentioned before. So she did decide to go to south of France and stayed there the entire time. She didn't end up with an itinerary that was taking her to a new place constantly. So she stayed there the entire time. She did go on a couple of excursions because she wanted that feeling of a little bit of bravery. So she tried and did a couple of things that pushed her a little bit. She also flew into Paris and had to figure out her own transportation south of France. So there were some elements in there that helped her feel courageous, but largely she wanted to feel peaceful. So that would not have been an 8-day itinerary hopping around everywhere.
Oh.
And that kind of showcases a little bit of the difference between the two. What I'm just explaining to you now are kind of the B and the R of the brave, the befriending yourself and the reimagining what's possible. Like what is possible for this transformation for you. And we're talking about our life and our trip as well.
Mm-hmm.
Most often I work in a group program. Also, what's different about a travel coach, especially someone like me who has a group program, is you're planning your trip, but you're doing it in the context of other people kind of cheering you on. And when you get to the A and B, which is acting on what you're learning about yourself and what you're choosing and voicing how you're feeling, when you get to those parts, when you start acting on what you've just discovered and planning that trip, oftentimes we get scared or there's a fear comes in where you're like, who do I think I am taking 2 weeks off to go on this trip? Or what if my family needs me? Or what if this isn't safe? A lot, as you can see, there's a lot more to the process of starting the process of figuring out the trip. So when Robin figured out where she wanted to go, she's the one who booked her tickets. Now, I did get on Zoom together and I looked at, she was thinking about, I want to go to this hotel. What do you think about this hotel? So we looked at it on Zoom together and looked at it based on the words that she had. Did it look peaceful? This hotel actually had a bathtub in it, which is unusual in Europe. So right off the bat, I'm like, okay, well, there's your peacefulness, like a bath in the south of France. That sounds amazing to me. But also I look at things with an eye of, does it look like it's in a safe place? I read the comments. There are things that I taught her to do as well that she might not have learned by working with a travel agent either, as I taught her how to figure out, make sure this is in a safe location, do a little bit of homework. Let's look at that. Here's how to look for flights and how you might find the best deals. Some of my clients do use travel agents to choose their flights too. Like you can't do that, but just even knowing how to book a flight and the process of it is empowering for a lot of
Oh yeah.
the women that I work with. And also them with the V, like I said, with the voicing the fears, them understanding that fear is part of the trip, that it happens. Like I've been to 50 plus countries and it's so interesting to me, but every time I'm about to go on a trip, there is something that scares me. There's something that I'm like, oh my gosh, am I doing this or should I be doing this? There's always something that comes up. Also, just for everyone to know that it just because you're nervous when you're making a trip or some fears come up or questions, or maybe your family is like, what the heck are you doing? You're going to go by yourself. You're going to get kidnapped, you know? Things like that. People say scary stuff to you sometimes when you're planning something new. And to normalize that. So the group and a coach, I help normalize that is normal for that to happen. It doesn't mean you shouldn't go necessarily. Like sometimes there are things that come up that you might need to reevaluate exactly the trip or where you're going. But a lot of times it's these old fears. Finish that acronym just so I do that.
Mm-hmm.
The E, embark. It kind of takes double duty, enlist your people and embark. So I always think traveling, especially solo, it's a good idea to have some people, where you're going and understand
Right.
your itinerary and can kind of cheer you on in the process. It's also why I love the group program because we have the women are all cheering one another on. Robin's going on her trip. We always have a party for like a going away party for each person. Send them little notes to take along their trip with them that they can pull out when they want. And I guess I'm giving you a long answer, but another thing that would be different is that I'm available, your coach is available while you're on your trip and when you come back, or at least that's how I package it.
Oh,
I think of it as a wraparound experience. I keep using Robin as an example, but let's just go with Robin as well. When Robin was overseas, there was a day where there were some things going on for her that were difficult. So she reached out to me and said, "Hey, can we do a call?" And I always include a call or two, depending on how long someone's gone. And it might be to troubleshoot something. It might just be that they want to share the amazing stuff that's been happening. It might be a crisis, who knows? It could be anything, but she just needed to unpack some stuff that was going on with her. And we got on Zoom, chatted. And then when she came back, I used to work in higher ed and take students on study abroad trips. I also know that there's a good amount of research that shows that some of their transformation comes on the back end. When you come back home and you're integrating what you learned, what you
mhm.
experienced into your life now. And it's also really difficult sometimes when you come home because you've had this amazing experience. Not everyone understands it. You're trying to unpack what you've learned and who you are. And that's also included too. When we came back, we did debriefing and we talked about what she's learned and how some of those things can be brought and moved forward into your life now so that it's not just this experience that happened, this one off thing, but you felt transformation in your life. How can we keep that going now that you're home?
Oh, I love that.
So, yeah.
How did you become a transformational travel coach?
By accident.
That's the
As
best
most,
kind.
honestly, it's why I believe so much in travel being transformational because it's a result of my own trip.
Mm,
So I went overseas at one point in my life when I was married and questioning a lot of things. And once you start questioning a decade relationship, a lot of questions start coming too. I started questioning that. I was also questioning, do I really love what I am doing for a living? I've been a writer for 20 plus years. I enjoy it, but is that all I want to do for the rest of my life? I started to feel like I wanted to be more directly involved in the changing of people's lives. And as a writer, yeah, I write things that might change people's lives, but I don't always see it. And
mm,
I knew that I wanted to see it, but I had no idea like how to, okay, so I've been a writer for most of my career. I had no idea, okay, well, what would I do that's different? I went on my own trip and I had no idea really what was going to happen, but I knew that I needed to get away from my everyday life. I always say that, in order for wisdom to speak, we have to create space to listen. I needed space to listen to what was going on inside of me. And I had so many people here at home giving me opinions about what I should do or not do. And I couldn't hear my own voice
right.
anymore. I also sort of felt like I didn't know who I was anymore because in our space and you live somewhere for a long time, it's like everyone, you're kind of defined. When you start wondering, is that really who I am? Start asking questions often in midlife. And I was in my mid 40s at the time. Maybe I was early 40s. Anyways, regardless, in my 40s. And I went away on this trip and was asking all these questions. And to get to the root of your answer, that experience was just incredibly transformational for me. And part of that time was me asking, can I give myself permission not only to make the choices I needed with my
Mhm.
relationship, but also my job? And I don't think that if I had not taken the time out to really get to know myself and to listen to that voice inside, I would have never been willing to pivot my job. I would have stayed as a writer forever because it was safe and I knew it. But when I was there, I had this really specific experience in this place in the country of Montenegro in the town Kotor, which I'm actually taking a group of women there in September on a retreat because I love this place so much. And it was so transformational to me. But I was there floating in the water and really frustrated because I'm not ready to go home. I feel like I haven't had this amazing epiphany to answer all the questions in my life, and I don't really still feel like I know what to do, and not sure I love my job and all of that. And I had been thinking about, I have this therapist who had said to me, Dawn, this is a blank canvas on which you can build a beautiful new life. And I had been annoyed at that because I thought, I don't want a blank canvas. That's just a big white thing. Like, what do I do with it? I have this life. And what if it's all of a sudden blank and I can like recreate it? Then I don't know what to do. And I'm scared. And as I was floating in that water, I heard this voice that said, well, why don't you just pick a color and start? And I know that sounds super simple, but it was profound. Sometimes these simple things hit you at the right
Hmm.
moment. And that felt to me like permission to come home and really look at what do I love and what do I want and who do I want to work with and what do I want my life to look like. And it wasn't like, aha, I'll become a travel coach. It was, how about you go home and start looking at options and be willing to step into it, whatever that is. So I started to notice what I just said earlier. I want to make change personally with people. What does that look like? And then when I started noticing, like, what do I naturally do that I love, that I do for free, maybe, or whatever, I know that I often was being asked to have coffees with other women who were in the middle of career change or something like that. And I would just do it for fun. And I didn't even think anything of it. Then I started looking at it with a different lens of, what do you actually love? Oh my gosh, I love doing that. I love working with these women. One day I was doing a meditation on my couch and it just popped into my head. What if you work with women? What if you help women do what you just did? Because I had a friend a couple days earlier say, like, why don't you help other women do what you just did? That trip was transformative for you. What if you did that for other people? And I was like, that's not a job.
Mm.
Who would pay for that? And she's like, you'd be surprised. I kind of poo-pooed it, but then it popped back into my head during that meditation. So I grabbed my phone and Googled something about women and traveling. And what came up was travel coach. And I didn't even know that was a thing. And
Right.
I went, holy shit, that's a job. And I mean, honestly, that's how it started, was me realizing, oh my gosh, there are other people doing this. Maybe I could do this. And then
Yeah.
me being willing to step into the fact of, okay, well, maybe I put it out there and do a beta group just to try. Does it work?
Hmm.
It's going to work for me to try this idea on. And honestly, like I said, I would never have been willing to do that had I not learned while I was overseas, started to get a little bit of comfort with stepping into the unknown. And
Hmm.
this for sure was stepping into the unknown. It was me putting it out there at first of, I'd like to start a group of anybody interested. That's really kind of how it started, is me trying it and sort of took what was transformational for my trip and put it into this program. And the results, like, honestly, the transformation I've seen in the women who are in the group is well beyond what I expected. So it's been amazing. I stepped into it and it slowly has, trying new things and my willingness to step into it and try it. I mean, I still do writing as part of my job as well. So it's not like I do this full time, but it's me taking steps towards something that
Yeah.
I know brings me alive.
That's so cool. Everyone I've talked to is they've just kind of fell into it some one way or another. And I just love hearing those kind of stories.
I know, honestly, that used to be frustrating to me when would hear people say that, because I'd be like, okay, but that doesn't, then how do I find what I want to do? Because everyone seems to find it on accident. But honestly, I think it is us stepping into things that bring us alive, that we're
Hmm.
passionate about. And as you step into it, then you might see something around that corner that leads you to the next thing, to the next thing. So it's not always this big epiphany. I know from 10 years old, I couldn't have known that when I was young to be a travel coach. That would have never been we didn't even have the internet, something that I could have imagined or thought was possible. But yeah, it is a matter of us following things that make sense or that bring us alive, and slowly you
Yeah.
make your way.
As much as we love traveling to far off places, how can someone like me who has done the travel or just doesn't prefer to travel overseas or further away anymore, how can we have like a similar experience on a weekend or a day trip instead?
Yeah, I love that question because I do think it's possible, with a couple caveats. For sure, that exercise that I mentioned with Robin of imagining the
Hmm.
most amazing trip possible. And I have a PDF downloadable thing on my
Okay.
website, and I'll give you a link to it, that I think would be really great for people to use. You could easily use that for a weekend trip. I have done that for myself where I want to do something on the weekend. And I often will do that exercise of, okay, let's imagine most amazing weekend experience I could possibly have. And sky's the limit when you're imagining it, because it just gets your creativity flowing. It doesn't mean you're going to do all of those things. But when I do that, I often can notice there are things I'm wanting to feel for the weekend. It gets back to those feelings as well. I live in Michigan, so if I were to recognize I really just want some peace and quiet and tranquility, I might go to the UP and, pitch a tent or stay in an Airbnb or something and spend time on the lake. If I want to, feel more maybe curious and alive, maybe I'm going to go head over to Detroit area or something like that, or maybe I hop in my car and take a road trip down to Nashville. It'd be things like that. That's where I would start. Is I think you can easily do this with that is often when we're having that itch to do something and we might not want to go on this massive trip overseas, or not everyone's able to do that, you need something in your life, think about what it is that you're hoping to feel or that you're missing, that your soul is desiring, and then plan something around that. I do that sometimes even here. I live in Grand Rapids, and even for a day, sometimes I'll be like, okay, today I just need to feel more vibrant because I'm just kind of feeling down. And sometimes I'll just pick a part of the city and go wander around and see what's new in the city. Are there new coffee shops or a lot of distilleries and bars and stuff? So maybe there's a new cocktail I can try. I don't know. There's different things like that. Or sometimes I'll go up north and go wine tasting if you just want some adventure. So I think that you could easily do some of these things. The only caveat I mentioned is that I do think that if you're deciding to go on a weekend trip or staying close to home because you're afraid to go overseas and kind of really want to go somewhere, but you're just chicken, I think that's a different conversation. Because I said sometimes wisdom to speak, we need to create space to listen. And sometimes it's really hard for us to give ourselves permission to care for ourselves. If you know that you really want to go on a trip and it's just scary, or you're not sure that you should, it feels indulging, or then that's where I might encourage someone to maybe not be overseas, but maybe you go, for people who are in the Midwest, maybe you go to the East or the West Coast, a little bit farther away, something that pushes on that a little bit. Cause I do think that we get to give ourselves permission to care for ourselves. And if we need something like this, then it's important to look at how we can do that for ourselves and not just stay in a state of being afraid to try something new. And maybe people around you who might encourage you to step out and to step into a trip that feels like you're stepping into something that's new for you, a little bit of the unknown. Because I do think that that's where transformation comes from, is stepping into the unknown. I'd also encourage people to do that too, but sometimes you can't really get away, or it's just not in the cards for you, or you just really have no desire to do it. I mean, those are true. I know several people who just hate traveling. That is their way of doing things, like more close around. And I know a few people who don't like traveling but have a very vibrant life. They're just out doing weekend things, and I definitely think that's possible too.
Yeah. I have a combination of the two. I'm just done traveling and been wanting to go on a cruise. I don't like the idea of being surrounded by water, being stuck with a bunch of people on a ship. I'm sure that's a whole thing, but the only reason I haven't gone on a cruise. But yeah, when I was younger, I went with like my high school and we went to Europe, and that was amazing.
Yes, we've had some good experiences, but I also, like I said, we have to listen to yourself and what you want and what you need. And some people know that they really want travel, and but they're maybe afraid, or they are willing to do it. And then some people, it's not for them. I mean, I'm not forever. The work I do is not for
Right.
everyone. And I'm not in the business of talking everyone into going on a trip that they don't want or need. I help people walk, that know they want to go somewhere, but they need maybe some help walking through the fear or figuring it out. It seems like a huge thing in front of you. Like, I'd love to have a wonderful, like people sometimes say, eat, pray, love experience, but where do I start? Where do I go? Well, that's where my sweet spot is helping people figure that out.
I love that. So, what insights do you have for us about aging and being child free? Because as we're recording this, I'll be 38 tomorrow. I mean, I'm not worried about getting older. It's just interesting about the whole aging process.
Yeah, and I'm in the middle of it, so I don't know if I have great answers, but first of all, happy birthday.
Thank you.
But I think some of it for me goes back to me talking about my friends in my yard. I think as we age, it's important to have those people around us who bring vibrancy to our lives that keep us alive and active. I also think, hanging out with younger people is fun too because it also keeps me going. But have you ever seen The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel? That movie?
No, but
If
sounds
no
like I
one's
should.
seen it, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it, you should go watch it. But it's basically how a lot of older people end up in this retirement village that's in India. It unpacks these ideas of aging, and some people have kids, and quite a few of them don't have children. Some of them do, but it's kind of thought provoking. It gets you thinking. But I know that for me, to be honest, I think friends are important, but I'm also in the process of asking those questions of, okay, well, what does that mean for me? Because, like I said earlier, one of my biggest fears deciding, okay, you're either going to have kids or not, as I got older, knowing that that meant I didn't have kids don't always take care of their parents. At least when you have kids, there's like somebody out there that is supposed to at least maybe try to take care of you when you get older, or at least feel guilty if they don't. I don't know. I know that that has always been a fear for me. And for me, it's stepping into and answering those questions of how can I plan knowing I'm child free? What might that look like? And what feels like a good future for me? And so it started with just having a good group of people around me who friends who are more like family to have those as I age and as I'm child free. But there also are questions that we need to ask too about what we want it to look like as we get older. I mean, I'm only 50, so I still have time. I'm not super old yet. But I also notice I've been asking a lot of women who are older than me questions about who I know don't have kids. What does it look like? I was just in Albania for a month and I was hanging out often playing cards with this group of women who were all older than me. Most of them were 20 plus years older than me.
Wow.
And they had just decided to up and move, and they live overseas for their retirement. Some of them have kids, some of them don't, some of them have no family. And I just made it my mission that month to ask them a million questions about what it's like the age, why did you choose overseas? What does that look like for you? Because I love travel and that's a consideration for me. Like, where do I want to age
Hmm.
child free and where does it work for me? Probably am not giving you any real answers other than maybe normalizing that we probably all have questions about what exactly is that going to look like. And also have, siblings and nieces and nephews too that I'm very involved in their life. And as I age, I'm sure they'll be involved in my life and have any wisdom to share it with them. I'm learning along the way. What does that look like? It is different. And I don't have lots of friends. Most of my friends do have kids. We don't always even have people to look at as for examples, which is why I was so excited about this group of women in Albania to just ask them 10 million
Hmm.
questions. What does this look like for you? And and it was really a good example to me seeing how resilient and how one particular woman, she has an amazing life there and she's on her own and she just is doing it. She does run into health challenges. She figures it out and she has built her own little community of card playing women in Albania of all places. You saw that and I thought, you know what? This is cool how people figure it out. You figure out what works for you. And she's created a community of her own in this way. Maybe that's part of the solution is looking at ways for us to have community.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. What's one main takeaway everyone to have today?
Take that first step, that first inkling, whether that's you want to go somewhere or that's I have a question about something or I'm not sure I like my job. Whatever those things are, or if you have an inkling that there's something you desire and you might want to do it but you're not sure, you don't have to have it. This is the thing that I've learned over time because I used to think I had to have like an entire business plan or a whole life
Mm,
plan before I could do anything because I need to know what I want and then I step into it. But actually, I think you step into it and then you start to see what you want and what you need. I guess maybe that takeaway from what we've talked about, we've talked about travel, but also me pivoting my job a little bit and
mhm.
figuring out child free, whatever that thing is, that inkling that you're curious about, maybe move toward it and
Yeah,
then see what happens next.
it's a journey.
Yeah, for sure.
And how can we connect with you?
My name is Dawn Pick Benson. And almost everything I do is under that name. So that's my URL, dawnpickbenson.com. My website has a couple of resources. You can also sign up to get emails from me, and I send them from when I'm traveling or when I'm home, what I'm learning about my own life, about aging. I also am on Instagram under that same name. Facebook, I have a group called Brave Journey. I can give you the link for that as well.
Yeah, all the
Those are
links
probably the
below.
main places. I'm on the social media. I have some YouTube videos, but they're all under my full name, Dawn Pick Benson.
Yeah, I'll put it below so we can find you.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much, Dawn, for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and send this to a child free friend. You can connect with me on social as Productively Child Free, mainly here on YouTube and Instagram. And remember, you're not alone. Until next time, stay amazing and live life your way.